All right, so today we're diving into a case that really shows you can't judge a book by its cover.
Oh, absolutely.
We're looking into the disappearance and death of Roger Fred Farmer.
Yeah.
It's one of those stories that at first seems pretty straightforward,
Right.
but then it just takes all these crazy twists and turns.
Yeah,
And you've brought us a true crime podcast episode.
I have.
It's called Family Matters.
Uh-huh.
What makes this one really interesting is that even after there's a conviction,
Yeah,
there's still so many unanswered questions.
there are.
And some things that just don't quite add up.
Exactly. It's a case where the truth was very, very carefully concealed,
Okay.
both literally and figuratively.
Interesting.
We're going to examine the evidence,
Right.
investigation,
Mm-hmm.
and ultimately the family dynamics
Right.
that fuel this whole tragedy.
Okay.
I think one of the most interesting things is that we get to hear from a lot of different perspectives.
Right.
We hear from the detectives,
Mm-hmm.
we hear from the family members,
Yeah.
but we never really get to hear from Jeremy, the convicted son.
So right from the start, we're dealing with a puzzle.
Yeah.
We're trying to piece together what actually happened.
Yeah.
And this story kicks off with something that seems really small.
Okay.
Just some text messages.
Okay.
Fred's friends and family start to get these texts, and they just seem off.
Mm-hmm.
Like they don't sound like him.
Uh-huh.
They were written in proper English.
Oh, wow.
They had emojis, which was completely unusual
Yeah.
because usually Fred would just use talk to text.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's such a good example of how even the tiniest details
Yeah.
can be a big clue in an investigation.
Right.
It's almost like when you see someone's handwriting change,
Yeah.
suddenly you get suspicious.
Yeah.
And on top of that, nobody had actually seen Fred
Right.
since mid-November.
Yeah, he was supposedly on this hunting trip,
Right.
but nobody seemed to know anything about it.
Yeah.
It was all really strange. And one of Fred's friends actually reached out to Detective Larry Cranoy.
Okay.
They were Facebook friends.
Oh, wow.
And the detective just had this feeling that something wasn't right.
That's interesting.
Yeah, what stands out to you about that?
It really highlights how these kind of random connections
Uh-huh.
can end up being super important in investigations.
Yeah.
Like, it's good to remember that just building relationships,
Right.
even online,
Yeah,
can have these unexpected benefits.
that's true.
In this case, it really jump-started an investigation
Absolutely.
that might have otherwise gone unnoticed.
So Detective Cranoy finds out that Fred's daughter, Christina,
Yeah.
had actually already filed a missing persons report.
Okay.
But Cranoy, he's a very thorough detective,
Mm-hmm.
decides to do a little more digging himself
Okay.
and ends up assisting the detective who was originally on the case.
Right.
Things take a turn when they start looking at Fred's finances.
Mm-hmm.
The bank statement showed way more
Yeah.
than just a missing person case. Charges were showing up at bars and restaurants Fred never went to.
Oh, wow.
So it became clear that someone was using his money
Yeah,
without his knowledge.
that's a big deal.
And then there was this purchase at Lowe's
Okay.
for over $200 on Fred's card.
Yeah.
Security footage showed that it was actually Fred's son, Jeremy,
Oh,
who was using the card.
that's a big turning point.
Yeah, what do you make of that?
Well, up until then, it could have been any number of things.
Right.
Maybe Fred really was on a hunting trip gone wrong,
Mm-hmm.
but now we're looking at potential foul play
Right.
within the family.
Yeah, and Jeremy wasn't exactly a model citizen.
Yeah.
He struggled with substance abuse,
Uh-huh.
and he had a pretty strained relationship with his dad and his sisters.
Okay.
It seems like this disappearance maybe was the breaking point
Yeah.
in an already bad situation.
Yeah, the family dynamics are definitely a key part of this
Yeah.
puzzle.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because Jeremy claimed
Mhm.
that he was abused by Fred during his childhood.
Right.
But Fred's daughters,
Yeah.
they disagreed with how bad the abuse was
Okay.
and suggested that maybe Jeremy was exaggerating
Right.
or even making things up.
It just reminds you that everybody has their own version of events.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of times they're colored by their feelings and maybe their own agenda.
Absolutely.
And the detective's job is to sift through all of that
Yeah.
and figure out the truth.
Right.
Speaking of which, the detectives started to notice something strange about Jeremy's behavior.
Okay.
He kept telling everyone that Fred was fine, even though he was using his credit cards
Yeah.
and spreading these weird rumors about Fred being shot and put in a freezer.
Oh, my gosh.
yeah.
That's a huge red flag.
Yeah.
That kind of behavior usually means someone is trying to control what people think,
Right.
trying to distract from what they're doing,
Right.
and also trying to make other people doubt what's happening.
Right.
It's a classic way to manipulate people.
Yeah. And the detectives weren't falling for it. They kept collecting evidence,
Mm-hmm.
talking to people,
Yeah.
and they even spoke to Fred's former roommate.
Okay.
And he dropped a pretty big bomb.
What was that?
He told them that Jeremy had confessed to him,
Oh, wow.
saying that he shot his father twice in the head
Oh, my God.
and put his body in a freezer.
So a confession.
Yeah, it was secondhand.
Right.
So how seriously did the detectives take this information?
Well, it's definitely made things more serious,
Yeah,
but they had to be careful.
right.
Was this a real confession?
Right.
Or was Jeremy just bragging?
Yeah,
They knew they couldn't just rely on this secondhand account.
right.
So they decided to bring Jeremy in for an interview
Okay.
and try to keep it casual,
Mhm.
not let him know they were suspicious,
Right.
just kind of feel things out.
So they're playing it cool.
Yeah.
But even in that setting, Jeremy's story starts to fall apart.
Oh, no.
He's being evasive, changing his story about the hunting trip,
Okay.
even making up these fake hunting buddies
No way.
named Brian and Dave.
Oh, my gosh.
And then there were the cell phone records.
Oh,
You know that digital trail that's almost impossible to erase?
Yeah.
They showed that Fred's phone never left Indianapolis,
Okay.
which completely contradicted Jeremy's story about the hunting trip,
Right.
and even more damning.
Yeah.
The record showed that both Jeremy's and Fred's phones were moving together,
Oh, wow.
putting them in the same places at the same time.
So they caught him in a lie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there was this brand new truck that Fred had bought.
Okay.
He was planning on starting a landscaping business with Jeremy,
Okay.
and the detectives found the truck in Jeremy's possession,
Okay.
which was really weird because Fred didn't even have a driver's license.
That is weird.
So at this point, the detectives had a lot of circumstantial evidence,
Right.
but they still needed something solid,
Yeah.
something that directly connected Jeremy to Fred's disappearance. Right.
And that's when they did a second search of Fred's house.
Okay.
And that's where things get really dark.
You remember those purchases Jeremy made at Lowe's?
Yeah.
The trash can and all the cleaning supplies and the air fresheners.
Mm-hmm.
It turns out that those weren't just random errands.
I have a bad feeling about this.
While Jeremy was sitting in jail saying that he was innocent,
Right.
the truth was actually about to come out
Okay.
in a very unexpected way.
Okay.
It all started with a storage unit.
Okay.
Jeremy had been paying for this unit with cash,
Uh-huh.
but the payment stopped once he was arrested.
So the owner of the storage unit got suspicious.
Exactly. They decided to repossess the unit
Okay.
because of those missed payments.
Mm-hmm.
But when they went to go clean it out,
Yeah.
they were hit with this really strong, awful smell.
Given what we know about those Lowe's purchases, this can't be good.
No, it's not.
So what do they find?
Inside the storage unit was that 96-gallon trash can that Jeremy bought.
Oh. And it was all wrapped up in tarps and those plastic drop cloths,
Mhm.
just like it said on that receipt.
And inside the trash can.
They found Fred's body.
That's awful, but it also kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
He clearly went to a lot of trouble to hide what he did.
He really did. It's actually remarkable that Fred's body was so well preserved
Yeah.
after being deceased for over a year.
Yeah. How is that possible?
Well, that cool, dark environment of the storage unit,
Uh-huh.
it basically acted like a tomb.
Wow.
But what's really disturbing is that Jeremy had been covering up that smell
Yeah.
with those timed air fresheners.
Oh.
And he kept replacing them over and over again
Just to try to avoid getting caught.
to avoid detection.
Yeah. I mean, the level of planning and deception is just mind-blowing.
It really is. He thought he had it all figured out,
Yeah.
but those missed payments
Yeah.
ended up leading the police right to the evidence.
It's almost like poetic justice.
It really is. And with the body being found, the prosecution finally had the physical evidence that they needed.
Right.
An autopsy confirmed that Fred had been killed by a single gunshot to the head,
Wow.
straight through his left eye.
So there was no question about Jeremy's intent.
No, not at all.
This was not an accident. This was planned out.
Definitely
Cold-blooded.
And to make it even more clear,
Mm-hmm.
the police found Jeremy's fingerprints and DNA all over that trash can.
So there's no way he could deny it.
Nope. There was no escaping the link between him and getting rid of his father's body.
So with all of that evidence, how did Jeremy explain all of this?
Well, during his trial in April 2023, he changed his story.
Okay.
Instead of claiming he knew nothing about Fred's disappearance,
Right.
he said he shot his father in self-defense
Okay.
during a drunken argument.
But doesn't the evidence kind of contradict that?
It does. The trajectory of the bullet and the fact that Fred didn't have any defensive wounds didn't support that story.
Right.
The jury saw right through it.
Yeah.
They found Jeremy guilty of murder.
Wow.
and sentenced him to 57 years in prison.
So in the end, justice was served.
Yeah,
But it's kind of bittersweet.
it is.
Fred's daughters, Christina and Trisha, lost their dad,
Right.
and it was their brother who took him from them.
What a devastating outcome for any family.
Absolutely. This wasn't just about a crime. This
Well-
was about a family being destroyed.
Yeah, when you lose a loved one like this, it's made even worse
Yeah,
by the betrayal and the broken trust
right.
when the person who did it
Yeah.
is somebody you're supposed to love and rely on.
It's heartbreaking. And even with Jeremy behind bars,
Yeah.
there are still some unanswered questions.
There are?
Fred's daughters think that maybe another family member
Right.
might have helped Jeremy cover up the murder.
They think someone else was involved?
Yeah, they pointed to the fact that this person was really close with Jeremy
Okay.
after Fred disappeared,
Right.
and that they were involved in spending Fred's money. And they even tried to claim some of Fred's belongings during the trial. So maybe another layer of betrayal within the family.
It's possible.
That's a lot to deal with.
It is.
Did the detectives look into those suspicions at all?
They did. They acknowledged that this other family member was acting suspiciously,
Yeah.
but they couldn't find any solid proof
Okay.
that connected them to the crime.
So it's still a mystery.
Yeah.
Just another layer of complexity.
It is. Sometimes, even with a conviction,
Yeah.
the whole truth stays hidden.
Right.
And that can be really hard for the people who are left behind.
Absolutely.
They have to live with those unanswered questions
Yeah.
and the pain of loss and betrayal.
This case really shows how hard it can be for victims of financial abuse to get help,
Yeah.
especially when it's happening inside their own family.
Right?
Fred tried to report what Jeremy was doing,
Yeah.
but it wasn't enough to protect him.
It's really sad. Makes you wonder what more he could have done.
Yeah, it's a tough situation because there's often so much shame and fear
Yeah.
that comes with financial abuse,
Uh-huh.
especially for older adults
Right.
who might depend on their kids for care.
Yeah.
It's important to remember
Mm-hmm.
that financial abuse is a type of elder abuse,
Right.
and there's help out there for victims.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about the money.
No.
It's about that emotional impact
Right.
and the feeling of being betrayed by someone you trust.
Absolutely.
So what are some red flags
Okay.
that people should look out for?
Right.
Maybe in their own families
Mm-hmm.
or even with older friends or neighbors.
Well, obviously, if money or belongings are disappearing,
Right.
that's a big sign.
Yeah.
But there are also more subtle things.
Okay.
Like changes in how someone banks, or sudden changes to a will,
Yeah.
or power of attorney documents, or even if a caregiver starts to control too much of the older person's life.
Sometimes those are all things to watch out for.
Those are good points.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's easy to ignore those little signs
Right.
or explain them away.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to trust your gut
Absolutely.
and say something if you see something that seems wrong.
Yeah. Getting involved early is so important.
Right.
And this case is a sad reminder
Uh-huh.
that financial abuse can get worse.
Yeah.
And sometimes it ends tragically.
It's not always just about money either.
No.
It can be about power
Right.
and control
Uh-huh.
and a feeling of entitlement.
Absolutely.
We've uncovered some really dark things in this deep dive.
We have.
But even with all of that, I
Yeah.
think there's some hope here too.
I agree.
Fred's daughters are really determined
Yeah.
to keep his memory alive, to focus on the good times and the love that he shared.
That's so powerful.
It is, even after such a horrible loss,
Yeah.
they're choosing to remember the positive things.
It shows that we can choose how we remember people
That's true.
and find meaning even in the worst situations.
And I think that's something we can all learn from.
I agree.
It's easy to get caught up in the details of a crime,
Right.
but we have to remember that these are real people,
Yeah.
real families
Uh-huh.
whose lives are changed by these events.
It's true. And for Fred's family,
Yeah.
the healing is still happening.
Right.
They're still looking for answers,
Mm-hmm.
trying to understand what led to this awful loss.
It's a process that takes time,
It does.
and they may never have all the answers.
Right.
But it's important for them to know
Yeah.
that they're not alone.
Absolutely.
There's help out there
Mhm.
for families of homicide victims.
And it's okay to ask for help
Right.
during such a tough time.
So if you were in their shoes,
Okay.
what else would you have done to try to find the truth?
That's a really interesting question.
Yeah.
Would you have looked into that other family member more?
Yeah.
Would you have tried to get Jeremy to talk in a different way? Every case has its own challenges.
That's true.
And it's easy to say what you would have done after the fact.
This case may be closed.
Yeah.
But it definitely makes us think
Does.
about family relationships,
Wow.
about financial abuse,
Mm-hmm.
and about how far some people will go.
Yeah. For their own selfish reasons.
It's a lot to take in.
It is, and I really appreciate you diving into this with me.
It's been a fascinating discussion.
Yeah.
And remember, this is just one deep dive.
Right.
There are so many more stories out there waiting to be explored.
So keep those sources coming, everybody.
Yeah.
And we'll see you back here soon
Sounds good.
for another deep dive into the unknown.